You've been manipulated your entire life. And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it as a statement of fact. Every ad you've ever seen, every politician you've ever listened to, every person who's ever talked you into something you didn't fully want to do, they all use the same playbook. A playbook that exists and that almost nobody talks about. It's called dark psychology. And if you're a man over 30 who is serious about taking control of his life, about building something real, protecting himself from people who want to use him, and understanding how human beings actually operate, this video is for you. Stick with me, because by the end of this, the world is going to look very different to you. Here's exactly what we're going to cover today. 7 dark psychology secrets. Not 7 vague concepts. 7 specific, real, documented tactics that are being used on you right now. By governments, by corporations, by people in your own life. And at the end of every one of them, I'm going to show you how to defend yourself. Because here's what most dark psychology content gets wrong. They teach you these tactics like they're weapons to use on other people. That's not what this channel is about. This is about you understanding the game so you stop being a pawn in it. Now, fair warning, some of what I'm about to show you is going to be uncomfortable. Because once you see these patterns, you'll start noticing them everywhere. In your workplace, in your relationships, in the news, in your own past, and the moments you were taken advantage of without even knowing it. That's not a bad thing. Awareness is the beginning of freedom. But here's what I want you to hold on to through this entire video. We're not studying dark psychology to become manipulators. We're studying it to become the kind of man who can't be manipulated. There's a difference. A big one. All right, let's get into it. I'm starting with this one because once you see it, you will never unsee it. It's called the problem-reaction-solution cycle. And it works like this. Someone, a person, a company, a government, wants you to accept something you would never normally accept. A new rule. A new restriction, a new product, a new way of thinking. But they know if they just put it in front of you directly, you'll say no. So they don't do that. Instead, they create the problem first. They manufacture a crisis, or they amplify an existing one. They make it feel urgent, scary, and unavoidable. They flood your attention with it. They make sure you're thinking about nothing else. Then they wait for your reaction. You get scared. You get angry. You demand that someone do something. You beg for a solution. And then, right on cue, they hand you the solution they wanted to hand you all along. The one you would have rejected if they'd led with it. But now you're grateful for it. You asked for it. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is documented. Naomi Klein laid it out in a book called The Shock Doctrine. The researcher Noam Chomsky identified it as one of the core tools of media control and population management. It has a name in political science. It has a name in psychology. And it works on individuals too, not just societies. Think about the person in your life who always seems to have a crisis. Always an emergency. Always something going wrong that only you can help with. And somehow the solution always benefits them. Somehow you always end up giving more than you plan to. That's the same cycle. Smaller scale. Same mechanism. Here's how you defend yourself. Anytime someone presents you with a crisis and an immediate solution in the same breath, slow down. The urgency is manufactured. The window is artificial. Real decisions can almost always wait 24 hours. And if someone is pressuring you not to wait, that pressure itself is the manipulation. Ask yourself, who benefits from this solution? Follow that thread. It will almost always lead you to the person who created the problem. Here's a question. If someone walked up to you today and told you to give away half your paycheck, surrender 3 of your personal freedoms, and accept living under new restrictions, what would you say? You'd say no, obviously. But what if instead they took one small thing from you this month, and then another small thing next month, and they did it slowly, with reasonable sounding explanations each time, over a period of 10 years? Would you even notice? This is called the gradation of changes. The slow boil, and it is one of the most effective manipulation tactics that exists. Because it never triggers your alarm system. You don't fight back against something you don't notice. The same psychological principle shows up at every level of life. In a relationship with a controlling partner, It doesn't start with them isolating you from your friends and making all your decisions. It starts with small comments, small requests, small jealousies that seem almost flattering at first. Then, one day, you look up and realize you've drifted completely away from who you were and what you wanted. At work, it doesn't start with an unreasonable workload. It starts with one extra project. Then the expectation that you're available after hours. Then the assumption that you'll cover for someone else's failure. The changes are gradual enough that it never feels like the right moment to push back, until the moment where pushing back feels impossible. In society, and the book in our context file documents this clearly, new socioeconomic conditions that would have caused revolutions if implemented overnight are implemented drop by drop across years. People accept today what they would have revolted against last decade, simply because they never saw it all at once. Here's how you defend yourself. Develop the habit of looking back over long periods, not just asking how you feel right now, but asking, how does this compare to 6 months ago, a year ago, 5 years ago? Men who get manipulated don't lose their ground all at once. They lose it inch by inch. Men who don't get manipulated check the map regularly. They notice when they've drifted. The moment you catch yourself saying it's just this once for the 4th time, recognize that phrase for what it is. Not an exception. A pattern. This one is the one I want you to pay the closest attention to. Because it's not just used by governments and corporations. It's used by people who are close to you, and it might already be working on you right now without you knowing it. The tactic is called replace reflection with emotion. Here's how it works. Your brain has 2 modes, thinking mode and feeling mode. When you're in thinking mode, you analyze, you question, you slow down and evaluate whether something is actually true or good for you. When you're in feeling mode, when you're angry, scared, excited, or flooded with any intense emotion, your critical thinking essentially shuts off. Manipulators know this. They know it well. So instead of making a logical case for what they want, they make an emotional one. They show you something enraging, something that makes your blood boil, something heartbreaking, something terrifying. Because the moment you're in that emotional state, you're not evaluating what they're saying. You're just reacting. This is why the most manipulative news is always the most emotionally charged. It's not an accident. Emotional content bypasses your analytical mind. It reaches you at the level of gut reaction. But here's what I want you to sit with. Think about the last time someone convinced you to do something you regretted. Were you thinking clearly in that moment? Or were you angry, embarrassed, afraid, trying to prove something? Almost every bad decision I've ever made came out of an emotional state, not a thoughtful one. And the people who benefit from your bad decisions know this. The salesman who creates urgency. The partner who picks a fight right before asking for something. The boss who praises you right before dumping an unreasonable task on you. The friend who reminds you of a favor right when you're feeling guilty about something else. They're all doing the same thing. Triggering an emotional state so your rational mind steps aside. Here's how you defend yourself. Build a rule for yourself. One rule. Any decision made in an emotionally heightened state gets a 24-hour delay before you commit. No exceptions. When you feel the emotion rising, and especially when you feel pressure to act immediately while that emotion is high, that's your signal. Not a signal to comply, a signal to pause. Men who can regulate their emotional state are extraordinarily hard to manipulate. Not because they don't feel things, but because they've learned to feel things and still think clearly. That's a skill. And like every skill, it can be built. Let me ask you something. How does someone control another person without them knowing? Simple. You make sure they don't understand what's happening to them. This is called the strategy of promoting ignorance. And it is more organized, more intentional than most people are willing to believe. Here's the core idea. The more a person understands about how power works, how money works, how systems work, the harder they are to control. An informed person asks inconvenient questions. They notice things. They push back. An ignorant person? They accept what they're told. They don't know what they don't know. And that makes them manageable. So the systems that benefit from your compliance have a vested interest in keeping you distracted, entertained, and intellectually shallow. Not because there's some shadowy meeting where they plan it explicitly, but because it serves their interests. And systems that serve their own interests perpetuate themselves. Think about what takes up the majority of your mental attention on any given day. Sports scores, social media drama, celebrity gossip, outrage about something that happened that you have no power over. Entertainment designed to keep you glued to a screen and coming back for more. Now think about what you don't know. How the monetary system actually works. How legislation actually gets made and who funds it. How algorithms on your phone are engineered specifically to maximize the time you spend on them. How your spending habits are tracked and sold and used to show you exactly what will make you spend more. These aren't conspiracy theories. These are documented features of the modern world. The information is out there, but most people never go looking for it because they're too busy being distracted by content specifically designed to occupy the part of the brain that would otherwise ask questions. And here's what makes this personal. The man who doesn't understand how money works is easy to exploit financially. The man who doesn't understand human psychology is easy to manipulate emotionally. The man who doesn't understand his own value is easy to underpay, underestimate, and overlook. Ignorance isn't neutral. Ignorance is a tax, and someone is always collecting it. Here's how you defend yourself. Invest 30 minutes a day in learning something that makes you harder to control. That's it. Not 2 hours, 30 minutes. Books, not social media. Primary sources, not headlines. Learn how money actually works. Learn how persuasion actually works. Learn what your rights actually are. The most dangerous man in any room is the man who actually understands what's happening. Be that man. This one might hit close to home, and I need you to hear it. One of the most powerful tools in any manipulator's arsenal is this. Make the person who is being controlled feel like they are the problem. This is called giving resistance a bad conscience. And it's brilliant, in a genuinely sinister way, because instead of fighting against you directly, they turn you against yourself. Here's how it plays out. You start to push back against something. A relationship that's draining you. A job that's using you. A social expectation that doesn't fit who you actually are. And instead of that pushback being honored, instead of the system adjusting, the system turns around and tells you that you are selfish. You are greedy. You are ungrateful. You are the problem. The message, whether it comes from a person or a culture or a media narrative, is: the reason your life isn't working isn't because the system is failing you. It's because you aren't working hard enough, being selfless enough, grateful enough, compliant enough. And for so many men, that message lands. Because you were raised to take responsibility. You were raised to not complain, to push through, to man up. Those are good values. They're real values. But manipulators weaponize those values against you. They know that a man who takes responsibility for everything, including things that aren't his fault, is a man who will never fight back. Because fighting back means admitting that something outside of him is the problem. And he's been trained to believe that's weakness. Here's the truth. There is a difference between accountability and manipulation. Accountability says, this is within my control, and I own it. Manipulation says, everything that's wrong is your fault, including the ways we've treated you. A man who can't tell those two things apart will spend his life apologizing for things that were done to him, working harder to earn approval that was never going to come, shrinking himself to fit into spaces that were designed to keep him small. I'm talking to men who are 30 or older right now, because you've had enough years to recognize this pattern somewhere in your life. In a family dynamic, in a relationship, in a workplace, in a culture that tells you to want less, work more, and be grateful for the privilege of compliance. Here's how you defend yourself. Start distinguishing between guilt that comes from your actions and guilt that was installed in you by people who benefit from your compliance. Real guilt is specific. It points to something you did, something you can fix, and something that moves you toward better behavior. Manufactured guilt is vague, constant, and keeps you frozen. It never actually leads anywhere, it just keeps you manageable. When you feel guilty, ask, did I actually do something wrong? Or am I being made to feel wrong for wanting something legitimate? That question, asked honestly, will change your life. Here's something that most people don't know. There is a specific set of techniques, developed, refined, and used by everyone from therapists to salespeople to pickup artists to politicians, that can systematically influence how you think and feel, often without you ever noticing. It's called neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. And before you check out, hear me out. This isn't about crystals or self-help theater. This is about the documented ways that language, body language, and specific conversational patterns shape your emotional and mental state. Here's a simple example that you've almost certainly experienced. Is there a song that takes you back to a specific moment in your life? Maybe a place, a person, a feeling. You hear those first few notes, and suddenly you're not here anymore. You're somewhere else entirely, feeling something specific. That's called anchoring. And it's not magic, it's neuroscience. A stimulus gets paired with an emotional state often enough, and the brain creates a direct connection between them. The stimulus becomes a trigger for the state. Advertisers know this. They pair their products with feelings of status, belonging, and happiness. Repeat it enough, and the product becomes an emotional shortcut. You don't decide you want it. You feel it, and that feeling drives the decision. But it works in interpersonal manipulation too. Someone who consistently comes to you in a warm, generous mood when they want something, and only when they want something, is anchoring their requests to positive feelings in you. You associate their presence with good feelings. So when the ask comes, your guard is lower than it should be. A person who consistently praises you right before asking for something unreasonable is using the same mechanism. Warmth and praise become anchors. They activate a positive emotional state. In that state, you're more likely to say yes. There's also what the book we drew from calls mirroring, subtly copying someone's body language to build unconscious rapport. The way someone might subtly lean forward when you lean forward. Match your speaking pace, even mirror your word choices. It creates a feeling of connection that isn't necessarily earned. None of these things are evil on their own. Rapport is real. Connection is real. But when these techniques are used deliberately and covertly to get something from you, that's manipulation. Here's how you defend yourself. Learn to notice the pattern of when people approach you, not just how. If someone is warm and generous specifically in the moments before they ask for something, that's a pattern worth noticing. Notice also when you're being rushed, when you're in an unusually good mood right as a big ask comes, or when someone's warmth seemed to escalate right before they needed something. Slowing down, that same 24-hour rule, breaks most anchoring attempts, because the emotional state has time to fade, and you can evaluate the request with a clear mind instead of a triggered one. All right, this is the one I've been building toward, and it's the one that, if you really let it land, will change the way you see every interaction you have going forward. The final secret of dark psychology, the most powerful, the most unsettling, and the most important, is this. The people and systems trying to control you know you better than you know yourself, and they're using that knowledge. Think about what the modern world actually knows about you. Every search you've ever done, every video you've watched, and for how long, every purchase you've made, what you looked at but didn't buy, what you clicked on in the first 3 seconds versus what you ignored, the times of day you're most active, the emotional states that make you most likely to engage, spend, or share. Algorithms that run major platforms have literally billions of data points on human behavior. They know, statistically, reliably, what kinds of content trigger anger, what triggers fear, what triggers desire. And they serve you that content specifically because those emotional states make you more engaged and more likely to stay. That's not a theory, that's their business model. But here's where this gets more personal, and more important for the man watching this video. If you don't understand your own patterns, your own triggers, your own weaknesses, your own emotional needs, then you're walking through life with a gap in your armor that everyone around you can exploit, whether they mean to or not. The man who doesn't know that he makes bad decisions when he's tired is vulnerable to anyone who approaches him late at night with a big ask. The man who doesn't know that he's emotionally driven by approval will keep working for bosses who dangle praise but never deliver respect. The man who doesn't know that his deepest fear is being abandoned will keep accepting treatment in relationships that he should have walked away from years ago. Self-knowledge isn't just personal growth philosophy. It's armor. The book that this video draws from makes this point plainly. Once you understand how your psychology actually works, once you see your own operating system, the patterns you repeat, the states that make you vulnerable, you become significantly harder to manipulate, because the people trying to influence you are counting on you not seeing what you're doing. Here's how you defend yourself. Start studying yourself with the same seriousness you'd study an opponent. Keep a decision journal. When you make a decision, especially one you later regret, write down what emotional state you were in when you made it, what you wanted at the time, what you were afraid of, what you were trying to prove. Patterns will start to emerge, and those patterns are gold. Because once you know your own triggers, you can start catching yourself in real time. Before you've already said yes, before you've already walked through the door. A man who knows himself is a man who is very, very difficult to play. You just got 7 of the most important insights in this entire space in one video. But understanding dark psychology, knowing the tactics, is only half the picture. The other half is building the internal foundation that makes these tactics ineffective against you. The self-discipline, the emotional regulation, the self-awareness, the psychological strength that allows you to see manipulation coming and hold your ground. I made a video specifically on that, how to build the kind of mental toughness that makes you genuinely hard to manipulate. Go watch that next. I'll have it linked right here. I want to leave you with this. You didn't ask to grow up in a world that's trying to manage you. You didn't sign up to be a target of psychological manipulation. You just showed up, and the game was already in progress. But now you know what the game is. And a man who understands the game can choose how he plays it. He can choose what he accepts and what he refuses. Who gets access to him and on what terms. What he gives and what he protects. That's not cynicism. That's power. You're 30 or older. You've got the life experience to recognize these patterns when you see them. And now you've got the language for them. Use it.